Ferrari dealer ignores black woman. She buys 5 supercars cash. Victoria Cross had walked into Milano Motors planning to buy 5 Ferraris before lunch, but 30 minutes of being ignored, dismissed, and treated like she couldn't afford a keychain had given her a much more expensive idea. What happened next would become automotive industry legend. The day a Ferrari dealership learned that discrimination doesn't just cost you customers. It costs you everything, including your reputation, your sales records, and sometimes even your business itself. The morning sun blazed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Milano Motors, casting dramatic shadows across a showroom that housed some of the most beautiful and expensive automobiles ever created. At 41, Victoria Cross moved through the gleaming space with the confidence of someone who understood both the artistry and engineering that went into every curve, every line, every carefully crafted detail of the supercar surrounding her. Milano Motors was no ordinary dealership. Located in the heart of the city's luxury automotive district, it was the kind of establishment that catered exclusively to clients who measured their wealth not in thousands or even hundreds of thousands, but in the millions that allowed them to acquire rolling sculptures that most people would never see outside of magazines or movies. The showroom floor featured a carefully curated selection of Ferrari's finest offerings, a gleaming red F8 Tributo that seemed to pulse with barely contained energy, a midnight black SF90 Stradale that looked like it had been carved from obsidian, and a stunning yellow 812 Superfast that commanded attention from every angle. Victoria paused near the F8, her practiced eye taking in the details that separated automotive art from mere transportation. She had been collecting supercars for nearly 2 decades, building a garage that included everything from classic Lamborghini Countaches to modern McLaren P1s. But Ferrari remained her first love, the brand that had sparked her passion for automotive excellence when she was still a teenager, working part-time jobs to save money for her first car. Today's visit to Milano Motors wasn't casual browsing. Victoria had very specific plans. She intended to purchase 5 Ferraris to complete a collection theme she had been developing over the past year. The F8 Tributo would join its siblings in her climate-controlled garage. The 812 Superfast would become the centerpiece of her weekend driving rotation, and the 3 additional models she planned to order, a Roma, a Portofino M, and the limited edition SF90XX, would give her the complete range of Ferrari's current offerings. It was, by any measure, a significant purchase. The 5 vehicles would total well over $2.5 million, the kind of transaction that should have had sales staff competing for the commission and management rolling out red carpets. But as Victoria moved through the showroom, examining the vehicles with the knowledge and appreciation of a serious collector, she began to notice that the attention she was receiving was quite different from what she had expected. Near the SF90 Stradale, 2 salesmen stood in conversation, their voices low, but their body language suggesting they were discussing business rather than casual topics. Victoria had encountered them briefly when she first entered the showroom, but their acknowledgement had been perfunctory at best. A polite nod and a generic, "Let us know if you have any questions," before they returned to their conversation. The older of the 2, a man in his 50s named Robert Chen, had worked at Milano Motors for nearly a decade. He understood the luxury automotive market well enough to recognize serious buyers, but his assessment of potential customers was filtered through assumptions that had served him adequately in a clientele that was predominantly white and male. The younger salesman, Derek Manning, was fresh from a luxury car sales training program that had taught him to identify qualified prospects through a combination of appearance, behavior, and what the training materials euphemistically called cultural indicators. Both men had noticed Victoria's arrival, noted her obvious interest in the vehicles, and made their evaluation. She was probably a car enthusiast who enjoyed looking at expensive automobiles, but was unlikely to be a serious buyer. Her presence in the showroom, they assumed, was more about aspiration than acquisition. This assessment became more entrenched when a young white man in his 20s entered the showroom. Jake Morrison was fresh out of business school and working his first job at a tech startup, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who expected to be taken seriously in luxury environments. His actual net worth was probably less than the cost of a Ferrari key fob, but his demographics and presentation style immediately triggered the SA. "Good morning," Derek said enthusiastically, practically sprinting across the showroom to intercept Jake before he had taken more than a few steps inside. "Welcome to Milano Motors. I'm Derek, and I'd be delighted to show you around. Are you interested in any particular model?" The contrast was immediate and stark. While Victoria had been browsing for 20 minutes with minimal attention from staff, Jake was receiving the full Milano Motors experience within seconds of his arrival. Derek's enthusiasm was genuine and energetic, his body language conveying respect and anticipation rather than the polite tolerance that had characterized Victoria's reception. "I'm just looking around," Jake replied, clearly enjoying the attention. "I've always been interested in Ferraris, and I thought I'd come in to see what you have available." "Absolutely," Derek exclaimed, as though Jake had just announced his intention to purchase the entire inventory. "Let me start by showing you this incredible F8 Tributo. This is one of our most popular models, and I think you'll find it represents everything that makes Ferrari special." Victoria watched this interaction with growing irritation. She'd been examining the F8 Tributo with obvious knowledge and interest, but Derek had positioned himself in Jake in a way that effectively excluded her from the conversation. When she moved closer to hear Derek's explanation of the vehicle's specifications, both salesmen seemed to treat her presence as an intrusion rather than an opportunity. The F8 features a 3.9-liter twin-turbo V8 that produces 710 horsepower, Derek explained to Jake, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of someone sharing privileged information. "It can accelerate from 0 to 60 in just 2.9 seconds, and the top speed is 211 miles per hour. Victoria knew these specifications well. She owned 2 other Ferrari models with similar power plants, but Derek's presentation was directed exclusively toward Jake, as though she were invisible or irrelevant to the discussion of automotive excellence. "That's incredible," Jake replied, though his appreciation was clearly that of someone who understood the numbers intellectually rather than experientially. "What does something like this cost?" Derek's response revealed the full extent of the assumptions driving the interaction. "Well, the F8 starts at around $280,000, but with the options and customizations that our clients typically prefer, you're looking at closer to $350,000. It's definitely an investment, but for someone with the right appreciation for automotive artistry." He let the implication hang in the air, suggesting that Jake clearly possessed such appreciation, while Victoria, by extension, did not. Victoria had heard enough. She stepped forward, her voice calm, but carrying an edge that made both salesmen turn toward her. "Excuse me," she said politely, "but I was hoping to speak with someone about purchasing multiple vehicles." Derek's expression shifted to one of barely concealed annoyance, as though Victoria had interrupted an important business discussion to ask about financing options or entry-level models. "Multiple vehicles," he repeated, his tone suggesting skepticism about her ability to afford even one. "Yes," Victoria replied evenly. "I'm interested in the F8, the 812 Superfast, and I'd like to discuss ordering 3 additional models." The statement should have stopped the conversation cold. A customer expressing interest in 5 Ferraris represented the kind of commission that salespeople dreamed about, the type of transaction that could define a successful quarter or even a successful year. But Derek's response revealed how deeply his assumptions had taken root. "I see," he said with condescending patience. "And are you familiar with Ferrari's pricing and ordering process? These vehicles require significant deposits and often have waiting lists." The implication was clear. Victoria was naive about the luxury automotive market, probably unaware of the financial commitments involved in supercar ownership, and almost certainly unable to navigate the complex process of acquiring limited production vehicles. Victoria felt her patience beginning to fray. She had been collecting supercars for nearly 20 years, had purchased dozens of vehicles from dealerships around the world, and understood the luxury automotive market better than most of the salespeople who worked in it. but Derek's condescending attitude suggested he viewed her as an amateur who needed basic education about car buying, rather than a serious collector seeking to expand her already extensive garage. "I'm quite familiar with the process," she replied, her voice remaining level despite her growing frustration. "I'd like to place orders for specific configurations, and I'm prepared to handle all financial arrangements today." Derek exchanged a glance with Robert, who had been observing the interaction with interest. The older salesman approached, clearly intending to handle what he perceived as a potentially difficult situation. "Ma'am," Robert said with practiced diplomacy, "we appreciate your interest in our vehicles, but Ferrari has very specific qualification requirements for new buyers. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at some of our pre-owned inventory, or we could discuss financing options that might make one of our entry-level models more accessible." The suggestion that she might need financing or that she should consider entry-level models was the final straw. Victoria had walked into Milano Motors planning to spend over $2.5 million on vehicles she intended to purchase outright with cash, and she was being treated like someone who needed help understanding how car loans worked. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Victoria said, her voice taking on the authoritative tone that had served her well in business negotiations over the years. "I'm not interested in financing, and I'm certainly not interested in entry-level vehicles. I'm here to make a substantial purchase, but I'm beginning to question whether Milano Motors is the right dealership for my needs." The threat of taking her business elsewhere should have prompted immediate changes in attitude and approach. In the luxury automotive world, reputation and word-of-mouth recommendations were crucial, and losing a potential customer to competitors was something no successful dealership could afford. But Robert's response revealed that he still didn't grasp the reality of what Victoria was offering. "Ma'am, I understand that everyone has dreams about owning a Ferrari, but we have to be realistic about what's possible. Perhaps if you spent some time researching the market and developing a better understanding of what's involved in supercar ownership, you might be ready to have this conversation in the future." The dismissal was complete and devastating. Victoria was being told in polite but unmistakable terms that she didn't belong in Milano Motors, didn't understand the automotive market, and should leave to educate herself before returning to waste any more of their time. Victoria reached into her handbag and pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts with deliberate calm. Both salesmen watched with mild interest, probably expecting her to call a friend or family member for advice about car shopping. Instead, Victoria pressed a number that connected her directly to the office of Alessandro Romano, the Italian-born owner of Milano Motors and one of the most respected Ferrari dealers on the East Coast. Alessandro had built his reputation over 30 years in the luxury automotive business, developing relationships with collectors and enthusiasts who appreciated both the artistry and performance of Italian supercars. "Alessandro," Victoria said when he answered, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet showroom. "It's Victoria Cross. I'm standing in your showroom right now, and I need to discuss some concerns about your sales staff." Alessandro's response was immediate and alarmed. "Victoria, what's wrong? Are you not being taken care of properly?" The use of her first name, delivered with obvious familiarity and respect, caused both Derek and Robert to freeze. They exchanged uncertain glances, clearly beginning to realize that their assessment of the situation might have been seriously flawed. "I'm afraid not," Victoria continued, her voice remaining calm but carrying an undertone that suggested significant consequences were about to unfold. "I came in planning to purchase 5 vehicles, but your staff seems to think I need education about car financing and entry-level models." Alessandro's sharp intake of breath was audible to everyone standing nearby. 5 vehicles? Mother of God, what have they done? "Victoria, I'm so sorry. I'll be down to the showroom immediately." As Victoria ended the call, the atmosphere in Milano Motors shifted dramatically. Derek's confident superiority had evaporated, replaced by growing panic as he began to understand the magnitude of his mistake. Robert, with his years of experience in luxury sales, recognized the signs of a catastrophic misreading of a customer's importance. "Ms. Cross," Robert said carefully, his tone now carrying the respect that should have been present from the beginning. "I think there may have been some miscommunication." "There was no miscommunication," Victoria interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut through his attempted damage control. "Your assessment of my qualifications was crystal clear. You determined that I couldn't afford your vehicles, didn't understand your market, and needed to be educated about the basics of car buying." Derek stepped forward, his earlier confidence replaced by obvious desperation. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. If you're a serious buyer, we'd be happy to—" "I was a serious buyer," Victoria corrected. "Past tense, now I'm a serious problem." Before either salesman could respond, Alessandro Romano burst through the showroom entrance, his expression a mixture of panic and fury. At 62, Alessandro carried himself with the elegance and intensity that characterized successful Italian businessmen, but today his usual composure was replaced by obvious alarm. "Victoria," he called out as he spotted her near the F8 Tributo, "I cannot believe what I am hearing. Please, tell me what has happened here." Alessandro's dramatic entrance and obvious deference to Victoria created a ripple effect throughout the showroom. Other customers and staff members began to take notice, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Jake, the young man who had been receiving royal treatment just minutes earlier, stepped back to observe the scene with obvious fascination. "Alessandro," Victoria said, her voice calm but carrying an undertone of steel, "I walked into your showroom 30 minutes ago planning to purchase 5 Ferraris. I was interested in the F8, the 812, and 3 custom orders. Instead of being treated as a valued customer, I was ignored, condescended to, and ultimately told that I needed to educate myself about car buying before wasting any more of your staff's time." Alessandro's face went through several color changes as he processed Victoria's words. His eyes darted between Victoria and his 2 salesmen, clearly trying to understand how such a catastrophic failure in customer service could have occurred in his establishment. "5 Ferraris," he repeated, his Italian accent becoming more pronounced as his stress level increased. "You wanted to buy 5 of my cars, and they dismissed you." "They assumed I couldn't afford a keychain," Victoria replied, her voice carrying just enough volume to ensure that everyone in the showroom could hear her words clearly. Alessandro turned to face Derek and Robert, his expression dark with fury. In rapid Italian, he delivered what was clearly a blistering assessment of their performance, his voice rising with each word. Even customers who didn't speak Italian could understand the general sentiment being expressed. "Mr. Romano," Derek said desperately when Alessandro paused for breath, "we were just trying to qualify the customer and make sure—" "Qualify?" Alessandro exploded, switching back to English. "You qualify Victoria Cross? Do you have any idea who you were talking to?" Derek and Robert exchanged confused glances, clearly not recognizing Victoria's name or understanding its significance in the supercar collecting world. Alessandro turned back to Victoria, his expression shifting from fury to profound embarrassment. "Victoria, I am mortified. These idiots have no idea that you are one of the most respected collectors on the East Coast. Your garage is featured in magazines. You have forgotten more about Ferraris than they will ever know." The revelation hit Derek and Robert like a physical blow. Victoria Cross wasn't just a random customer who had wandered into their showroom. She was a legendary collector whose reputation in the supercar community was well established. Her collection had been featured in Robb Report, DuPont Registry, and Classic Driver. She was exactly the kind of client that luxury dealerships competed aggressively to serve. "I didn't know," Derek stammered, his face pale with the realization of what he had done. "If I had realized—" "If you had realized what?" Victoria interrupted, her voice cutting through his attempted explanation. "That I was famous, that I had money, that I was worthy of basic respect and professional courtesy." She gestured around the showroom, her voice taking on the authority of someone who was accustomed to being taken seriously in business environments. "The problem isn't that you didn't recognize me. The problem is that you made assumptions about what I could afford based on how I look, and you treated me accordingly. You decided I didn't belong in this showroom before you knew anything about my qualifications, my interests, or my ability to purchase your vehicles." Alessandro nodded grimly, clearly understanding the full implications of what had occurred. In the luxury automotive world, reputation was everything, and word of this incident would spread quickly through the collecting community. "Victoria," he said carefully, "what can I do to make this right? Tell me how I can fix this situation." Victoria considered the question for a moment, looking around the showroom at the faces watching her with varying degrees of fascination, embarrassment, and fear. "Alessandro, you've always been professional and respectful in our previous dealings. This isn't about you personally, but your staff has created a situation that goes beyond just poor customer service. They've demonstrated the kind of discriminatory attitudes that have no place in any business, but especially not in one that claims to value all customers equally." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "I'll still make my purchases today because I need these vehicles and because I respect your business. But those purchases won't be made through Derek or Robert, and I'll expect you to address whatever training or cultural issues allowed this situation to occur." Alessandro nodded quickly, clearly relieved that Victoria was still willing to conduct business, but understanding that consequences would follow for his staff. "Of course. Absolutely," he said. "Derek, Robert, please return to the office. We will discuss your performance later." Both salesmen retreated with obvious reluctance, knowing that their careers at Milano Motors were likely over. Derek, who had been so confident in his assessment of customer qualifications, now understood that his assumptions had cost him the largest commission of his short career. Robert, with his years of experience, recognized that he had made a fundamental error that would probably end his employment at one of the most prestigious dealerships in the city. As they disappeared into the back offices, Alessandro turned his full attention back to Victoria, his professional demeanor restored, but tinged with obvious concern about the damage control that would be necessary. "Now then," he said, his voice carrying the warmth and respect that should have characterized Victoria's entire experience, "tell me about these 5 beautiful cars you want to add to your collection." Over the next 2 hours, Victoria and Alessandro worked through the details of her purchases with the kind of expertise and mutual respect that characterized transactions between true automotive enthusiasts. She selected the F8 Tributo in Rosso Corsa with a black leather interior, the 812 Superfast in Grigio Silverstone with carbon fiber details, and placed custom orders for a Roma in Blue Tour de France, a Portofino M in Giallo Modena, and an SF90X in Nero Daytona with racing stripes. The total came to $2.8 million, not including the additional options and customizations that Victoria requested for each vehicle. It was the largest single transaction in Milano Motors history, the kind of sale that would be discussed in the luxury automotive community for years to come. But as impressive as the financial figures were, the real story was what had happened in the first 30 minutes of Victoria's visit, and how dramatically different her experience became once her true status was recognized. Word of the incident spread quickly through the supercar collecting community, as Alessandro had predicted. Within days, discussions were taking place on exclusive automotive forums about the importance of treating all potential customers with respect, regardless of their appearance or perceived social status. Derek Manning was terminated from Milano Motors the following week, his brief career in luxury automotive sales ended by his inability to recognize that respect and professionalism should be extended to every customer, not just those who fit his preconceived notions of wealth and status. Robert Chen was given a final warning and required to complete extensive training on unconscious bias and inclusive customer service. His years of experience allowed him to keep his job, but the incident became a permanent part of his personnel file and a constant reminder of how assumptions could destroy careers. Alessandro Romano implemented new training protocols for all Milano Motors staff, emphasizing that every customer who entered the showroom deserved the same level of professional attention and respect. He also established a customer experience audit program, using mystery shoppers from diverse backgrounds to ensure that the lessons learned from Victoria's experience were properly implemented. Victoria's 5 Ferraris were delivered over the following 6 months, each one a masterpiece of automotive engineering and artistry. But more importantly, her experience at Milano Motors became a catalyst for broader discussions about inclusion and respect in the luxury automotive industry. 6 months later, Victoria was invited to speak at the annual Luxury Automotive Dealers Association conference about customer experience and the importance of treating every enthusiast with respect. Her presentation, titled "Assumption is the Enemy of Sales," became one of the most requested talks in the industry. She ended her presentation with a simple but powerful message. The supercar collecting community is diverse, passionate, and constantly growing. Dealers who understand this will thrive. Those who don't will lose customers, reputation, and ultimately their businesses to competitors who recognize that enthusiasm for automotive excellence comes in all colors, all backgrounds, and all appearances. Alessandro Romano, who attended her presentation, later said it was the most important business lesson he had learned in 30 years of luxury automotive sales. Milano Motors became a model for inclusive customer service in the industry, proving that respect and professionalism weren't just moral imperatives, they were also sound business strategies. And sometimes, when Victoria was driving one of her Ferraris on a perfect weekend morning, she would remember the day at Milano Motors and smile. Not because of the cars she had purchased, beautiful as they were, but because of the change that had resulted from her experience. Proof that standing up for respect and equality could transform entire industries, one dealership at a time. 2 years later, Milano Motors was featured in Automotive News as Dealership of the Year for customer service excellence and inclusive business practices. The article specifically mentioned their transformation following a customer service incident that had sparked industry-wide discussions about unconscious bias in luxury automotive sales. Victoria Cross was named Collector of the Year by the Ferrari Owners Club of America, with special recognition for her advocacy work promoting inclusivity in the supercar community. Her collection had grown to 37 vehicles from various manufacturers, but her 5 Ferraris from Milano Motors held special significance as symbols of both her passion for automotive excellence and her commitment to ensuring that all enthusiasts were treated with respect. Derek Manning eventually found work at a mainstream car dealership, where his experience at Milano Motors had taught him valuable lessons about customer service and the dangers of making assumptions. He later wrote a LinkedIn post about the incident, encouraging other sales professionals to treat every customer as if they might be their biggest sale of the year. The showroom where it all began was renovated to include a customer lounge designed to welcome collectors and enthusiasts from all backgrounds. A small plaque near the entrance read, "Excellence recognizes no boundaries. Every enthusiast deserves our best service." And in the luxury automotive world, Victoria's story became legendary, not just as a tale of spectacular customer service failure and recovery, but as a reminder that true automotive passion transcends all barriers and that the most important qualification for supercar ownership is the love of driving, not the color of your skin. This story reminds us that passion doesn't have a color and excellence doesn't discriminate. In the world of supercars, as in all aspects of life, assumptions about who belongs behind the wheel can cost more than just a sale. They can cost respect, reputation, and the opportunity to be part of a community built on shared love of automotive artistry. Sometimes the person you think can't afford the car owns more of them than you've ever seen. If you enjoyed this story of horsepower meeting human respect and luxury learning the value of equality, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because every day there are people proving that the fastest way to success isn't about the car you drive, but about how you treat the people around you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
If you liked the story and don't like it and subscribe and likely to comment, then your support a lot to me, and thank you. The Kame Story, see you in new stories.